Ignition running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's 9 after the hour. I am Erick Erickson. This is Atlanta's Evening News here on WSB. As always, you can also go to theresurgent.com where you can see the video of Nikki Haley before the United Nations. My goodness. We'll get to that in a minute. I got back from Nashville, drove back. The ride was great until I got into Cherokee County. Good gracious, there's a terrible wreck that backed up from Marietta north into Cherokee County. Had to get off near Woodstock, take Wade Green Road around, down 92, get back on the interstate at the 120 loop. I have no idea. I went through neighborhoods I know I've been in before. They were all very familiar, but my goodness. In any event, I'm back now, settled, so we can carry on with the show. There is breaking news right now. The United States House of Representatives has passed a funding resolution to keep the government going until next month. The Democrats would not help them on this, and Republicans would not vote for it if they continued it on past January. They want to be able to come back in January and come up with a better deal. They want to go home for Christmas as well, so this is the compromise. It is now over to the Senate. The Senate is expected to take it up. They will need Democrat votes. They are expected to get those Democrat votes, and they will go home. Otherwise, the government will shut down, but the government is not expected to shut down. In other news, Plant Vogtle will soldier on. The Public Service Commission did approve the continuation of funding for Plant Vogtle or the continuation of construction on Plant Vogtle. Some of the candidates were unhappy with this. Some of them were happy with this, gubernatorial candidates, I should say. I know Michael Williams was on the don't do it side. I think most of the others were on the do it side. The thing that kept it going is, excuse me, the thing that kept it going was that federal tax breaks are expected to be renewed by the federal government. The Public Service Commission voted unanimously to allow continued construction of the 2 nuclear reactors. This is from the AJC, which is billions of dollars over budget, years behind. Commission Chair Stan Wise said the decision came down to the importance of fuel diversity and the long-term benefits the project would have on Georgians. Georgia utility regulators on Thursday conditioned their approval of the Vogtle nuclear project on no small caveat, that Congress approves $800 million worth of tax credits as part of its decision allowing Georgia Power and its partners to pass more project costs on to ratepayers. The PSC unanimously approved language that would allow the 5-member body to reconsider if federal lawmakers do not greenlight the tax credits. Now, you should know that the U.S. Senate on Wednesday afternoon began this process. They intend to guarantee $23 billion in credits for Plant Vogtle for Georgia Power. So if that happens, Vogtle will go forward. If not, they got to shut it down and try to sell what's there for scrap. Here's the fallout. And this is why I think it was worth continuing the construction. You are going to get a rate increase regardless. Remember, the legislature years ago allowed Georgia Power to go on an advance cost. They've already gone over. Building a nuclear power plant is no easy thing, particularly when Westinghouse goes bankrupt. Either way, you're going to foot the bill. So you might as well foot the bill and get something out of this instead of footing the bill and getting nothing out of it. And that's largely what the PSC agreed with, and they are going to make it contingent on these federal tax credits. Now, it is a hot mess out there. It is terrible. People are leaving. A lot of people have off tomorrow. I will be here, by the way, and I will be doing the Christmas special beginning at 6 p.m. tomorrow. We'll run it throughout the weekend. If you are traveling out of town and don't want to miss what the meaning of Christmas is and all that in the annual Christmas special, you can text the word show to 444-999 and get the podcast. It will be put up in the podcast. Now, Nikki Haley, let's get to this. I'm going to play the audio. I'm just going to let Nikki Haley talk here for 2 minutes, 15 seconds.
When a nation is singled out for attack in this organization, that nation is disrespected. What's more, that nation is asked to pay for the privilege of being disrespected. In the case of the United States, we are asked to pay more than anyone else for that dubious privilege. Unlike in some UN member countries, the United States government is answerable to its people. As such, we have an obligation to acknowledge when our political and financial capital is being poorly spent. We have an obligation to demand more for our investment. And if our investment fails, we have an obligation to spend our resources in more productive ways. Those are the thoughts that come to mind when we consider the resolution before us today. The arguments about the President's decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem have already been made. They are by now well known. The decision was in accordance to U.S. law dating back to 1995, and its position has been repeatedly endorsed by the American people ever since. The decision does not prejudge any final status issues, including Jerusalem's boundaries. The decision does not preclude a two-state solution if the parties agree to that. The decision does nothing to harm peace efforts. Rather, the President's decision reflects the will of the American people and our right as a nation to choose the location of our embassy. There is no need to describe it further. Instead, there is a larger point to make. The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit. America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do, and it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that. But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered. Thank you.
Well, I mean, bring in hot fire there, Nikki Haley. So what this vote in the General Assembly is a UN rejection of the United States' decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. It is not binding. It has no power. The UN General Assembly has no power whatsoever. All the power of the UN is invested in the Security Council. The General Session of the UN, the General Assembly, is just a dog and pony show. I mean, it's totally for show. Nothing there is ever binding on the member states of the United Nations. And so what this vote was, it passed by 120 some odd votes, is basically these nations wanting to give a middle finger to the United States moving its embassy to Jerusalem. And Nikki Haley telling the United Nations that we are going to remember this, and those nations who get foreign aid from the United States who vote against us may not see their foreign aid renewed. And we shouldn't renew their foreign aid. We shouldn't. It is 25 after the hour. I am Erick Erickson, and you are stuck in traffic. I hope not, but the odds are you probably are. Oh, my goodness gracious. So the breakdown here on the UN vote. It really is a meaningless vote, but Palestinians are now they were calling for days of rage. Now they're calling for a day of blood. Not exactly nonviolent. It's not going to change things, but here's the reality. The odds are the embassy isn't going to move to Jerusalem. Now, I hope it does because I support it. And I know the president supports it. But there are plenty of people within the State Department, including, I suspect, Rex Tillerson, who really don't. And even Rex Tillerson has said it's probably not going to be next year when the embassy moves. So don't hold your breath for it to happen. But in the meantime, watch the hysterics on the left, because they are hysterical about this. And that seems to be the standard operating procedure now on the left is they get hysterical about absolutely everything. They are hysterical about it all. They are hysterical about about moving the embassy. They're hysterical about tax reform. They're hysterical about health care. I mean, they are really, there is nothing they're not hysterical about. David Frum, well, first of all, let me back up. Charles Cook at National Review pinned a piece on Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post, noting how she has taken diametrically opposed positions depending on the Republican. She hated Mitt Romney before she liked him. She hates Donald Trump, so she was against the Paris Accord until he got us out, and then she's for it. She was in favor of moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Now she's against it. And she's never provided a rational explanation for her changes other than Trump. That's it. And there are people like that out there. One of the common denominators, by the way, is they're all social liberals. They don't care about social conservatism. But these people are hysterical because of the president, and it's not like the president himself is doing all of this stuff without input from people who do know and are sharp. Yes, are there times the president does things himself that he shouldn't do? Yes, a lot of it is on Twitter. But we should not presume that a lot of these major decisions are not done without input from a lot of people, including John Kelly and General Mattis and McMaster, the National Security Advisor. But you would never know it from the hysteria. It is all hysterical all the time, including about tax reform, and there's news on that front when we come back. It is 39 after the hour. Vice President Mike Pence has made an unannounced trip to Afghanistan to meet with Afghan leaders and visit American troops. He arrived 4 months after President Trump outlined a new strategy to break the stalemate in our longest war. You know, let me get to tax reform. And Ross Douthat had a very good piece in the New York Times noting that we have all but won the war against ISIS. Now, Ross notes everyone is very hesitant to talk about it because there can still be random attacks. I mean, for example, and this is true, this is totally, absolutely true, after Ross wrote that piece, it was after Ross wrote that piece that ISIS lone wolves, and I'm using air quotes around the words lone wolves, went into the church in Pakistan and killed people. So because these attacks still happen, people look at these pieces and say, well, you can't say we've eliminated ISIS. But in fact, we have largely eliminated, not completely, but largely. And in fact, in terms of ground gained, etc., we've actually done a very good job of winning this war by upping the aggression against them and going to places like the places in Africa where we've been able to shut down ISIS cells. The president and his national security team have done a very good job of that. The president and his team have done a very, very good job of figuring out ways to shut down ISIS through traditional and non-traditional military means. And the president deserves credit for that. But he's not getting the credit because he's Donald Trump. He deserves the credit for it, though. And that was another point Ross Douthat made in his piece, is that this president really, truly does not get credit for the good things he does because there is a media bias against this president, the way this president is covered. And I'm glad to see this, because Ross's column, Ross is a conservative, he was the conservative at the New York Times, and his column appeared in the New York Times, and it was nice and refreshing to see his column in the New York Times reaffirming that and making liberal eyes see it, and you know they all hate reading that, in fact, yes, it is true, there is a liberal bias in the way the president is covered. So good for him for doing that, Ross, and good for the president for doing that. Now, let's get into tax reform because this is the most significant legislative victory of this president this year. And liberals are going insane over it. So you had all of these companies we covered yesterday. There's Wells Fargo, there's AT&T, there's Comcast, there's Fifth Third Bank, there's others. They're giving $1,000 bonuses. They're committing to charitable giving in local communities. They're increasing the minimum wage, some of them, to $15 an hour. On and on it goes. And what we are seeing is the left ridicule it and say it's not so. In fact, some of the liberal bloggers out there who were highly influential among the young reporters set in Washington were saying, don't believe it. There is no way Wells Fargo will do anything except pay off debts or give money to its rich shareholders if this thing goes through. Even though Wells Fargo was saying it was going to raise its minimum wage to $15 an hour. Well, guess what? Wells Fargo raised its wage to $15 an hour. And what is their response? Well, there really aren't a lot of employees who are going to be affected by this. They set it up so they can never lose the argument, and yet they are losing the argument. And this will have real economic benefits for the nation, and they can't deny it. Oh, Lord, I got to read you all this tweet. John Brennan, former CIA director for Barack Obama, 2013 to 2017, claims to be nonpartisan. This is his tweet. Trump admin threat to retaliate against nations that exercise sovereign right in UN to oppose U.S. position on Jerusalem is beyond outrageous. Shows real Donald Trump expects blind loyalty and subservience from everyone, qualities usually found in narcissistic, vengeful autocrats. Now, of course, the left is championing this. The left heralds this guy as a hero for being brave, for saying what the rest of them say. But what did we do? We stood up there and told these people it was our right to put our embassy where we wanted. And if they were going to ridicule the United States and drag us over the coals in the United Nations for doing what we have the sovereign right to do, there's no reason for us to give them foreign aid when they want it. I mean, Nikki Haley was right. And this is ridiculous. It's so funny to see people like this touting themselves as some sort of nonpartisan when they are bleeding heart liberal Democrats who call themselves progressives because they ruined the liberal brand. And here's the other thing. So the Trump administration's threat to retaliate against nations that exercise their sovereign right in the United Nations, we exercised our sovereign right to put our embassy where we wanted. And we do not have to continue paying welfare to nations that do not like it. But we see on the left constantly this idea that the United Nations is like the Congress of the world, and we are beholden to the United Nations. No, we're not. It's a bunch of kleptocrats, dictators, and fools. It is 54 after the hour. Erick Erickson here. The phone number, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. We'll open up the phones this next hour as a free-for-all since, well, we've only got 2 more days this year. I'm going to be gone next week, so we will take your calls next hour. Right now, I want to play audio from yesterday. It is old news now, but this is just too good to pass up. This is from 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time on Capitol Hill yesterday afternoon. The Democrats, they organized a counter-Tea Party protest. They were going to storm Capitol Hill and protest the passage of tax reform. Nancy Pelosi was coming to rally the troops. It would help if I got the audio synced right, wouldn't it? Here we go.
These protests have never been like what we saw with the health care law. This particular protest was supposed to start at 3, supposed to feature Nancy Pelosi, and supposed to have hundreds of people, and none of those things are going to end up being true. So there has been this protest effort to stop this and slow it down, but it is increasingly likely that the passage of this tax bill is more or less a foregone conclusion at this point, as long as there's not some other surprise defection here in the next 24 hours.
All right. So they barely had any people. In fact, the room had more Capitol Hill staffers coming to check out the protest than it actually had protesters. They couldn't muster the votes. And, you know, you see Democrats right now ridiculing the idea that a $1,000 tax cut is meaningful. Y'all, $1,000 is really meaningful to someone of lower income. It's really meaningful to someone of upper income. It's $1,000. That's good money. That's real money. The fact that they're ridiculing a $1,000 bonus from companies shows you how out of touch the liberals are. And what's more here, it essentially ridiculing the $1,000 that is going to lower-income family, blue-collar workers in some of these corporations, and I think it winds up actually being the average amount of money that people will save on their tax bill. It kind of shows you that Democrats don't believe there's ever a reason to cut taxes, that they would never give you a tax cut. And the Republicans, remember, they've set this up for 2026 to blow up in the face of whoever runs Congress if you can't get something done. If you can't get something done in 2026, all of this is going to expire and everybody's going to have massive tax increases. And when everybody has massive tax increases, the economy is probably going to go into a recession. And the Democrats are set up in such a way as to make it impossible to ever cut taxes. That's what they would prefer. All of your money belongs to the government. Remember, they consider it a cost to the government if you get to keep your money. You keep your money, it's cost to the government. That is crazy. Now, when we come back, we're going to open up the phones, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK, and we're going to discuss the president's year. How do you think the president did this past year? I'll let you weigh in, and I'll give you what he's trying to tell others is his scorecard when we come back.
All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It is 9 after the hour. I am Erick Erickson. This is Atlanta's Evening News on WSB. You can also go to theresurgent.com. You can get the podcast by texting the word SHOW, S-H-O-W, to 444-999. And you'll be able to get the Christmas presentation there. Or listen to it. We're going to be broadcasting it all weekend long on WSB. Very, very fortunate to work at a place that will let me do the Christmas show. Now, what about the president's year? What about the President of the United States and his major accomplishments? Well, they've sent out a press release to a lot of people on what all they feel like they've accomplished this year. And I do have to say, I got to acknowledge I'm not a huge fan of the guy, but I've been pleasantly surprised with the progress that the White House has made this year. I've been delighted with a number of the decisions they've done and policy decisions they have made. They've done a good job. And if the president were a different president, he would be getting better press. But I also think as much as the White House wants to just blame the media, they do need to blame the president to some degree for his Twitter fights and everything else that he does that does distract people. I mean, considering the very good State of the Union address he gave this past year, and within 48 hours, absolutely gone in the media because of his Twitter fights. They need to consider that. Now, I am curious in what you think his grade should be, what you think, what is his favorite accomplishment, according to you. Happy to take those phone calls at 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. Let me get through this list. They've sent 12 categories with 81 wins. On jobs in the economy, they say passage of the tax reform bill. They increased the GDP above 3%, something Barack Obama wasn't good at. They created 1.7 million new jobs. They saw the Dow Jones reach record highs, a rebound in economic confidence to a 17-year high, the executive order to boost apprenticeships, a move to boost computer sciences and education department programs, prioritizing women-owned businesses for some $500 million in SBA loans. And then, of course, they killed a bunch of the Obama regulations, and they've broken that into a new category. They signed an executive order demanding that 2 regulations be killed for every one created. Beat that big and cut 16 rules and regulations for every one created, saving $8.1 billion. Think about that one for a minute. A lot of savings there. Oh, dear. Sorry, the call screening program just decides it wants to stop all of a sudden. No, we don't want to. Don't display this message again. We're having difficulties here. Now, what about the rest of this? He signed 15 congressional regulatory cuts. He withdrew from the Obama-era Paris Climate Accord. He ended the threat of environmental regulations. He signed an executive order cutting the time for infrastructure permit approvals, eliminated the Obama rule on streams that targeted the coal industry, withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, opened up NAFTA for talks, worked to bring companies back to the U.S., and companies like Toyota, Mazda, Broadcom, Foxconn announced plans to open plants here, promoted the U.S. sale of U.S. products abroad, ended the deal with Cuba. The Department of Interior cut regulations, opened plans to lease 77 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for oil and gas drilling, expanded energy infrastructure projects like the Keystone XL pipeline, ordered the EPA to kill the Obama-era Clean Power Plan, and the EPA is reconsidering the methane emission rules as well. These are all good things that President Trump did. Now, they've got some other things in there. This isn't the complete list. I have only barely begun this list. But I'm interested in what your favorite thing is the president did as well. Let's go on to the phones now. Gerard in Norcross, we're going to start with you. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how you doing, Eric?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine. My question is, I hear the Democrats all the time state that corporations, they never really truly pay taxes. They pass it all on to consumers. So why wouldn't the flip side of that be that if corporations are given tax breaks, they can pass that on to their consumers?
Well, it's the Republicans who tend to say corporations don't pay. It's the consumers who do, and that's why they make the point of lowering taxes. Democrats tend to say if you lower corporate taxes and they get to keep more of their own money, they're not going to give it to their employees or their consumers. They're going to give it to their shareholders because they're primary obligated to shareholders. In fact, what we're seeing with what happened with this tax plan is they're giving it to their employees. They are giving people pay raises. They're not giving it back to shareholders. They're also paying off debt, which is a good thing for these companies. Democratic talking points all last week were that if you pass this tax cut, which, by the way, the corporate side of it is what Barack Obama wanted. They don't want to tell you that, but this is Barack Obama's corporate tax plan that the Republicans passed. But Democrats were saying if we did this, they're just going to give it to shareholders. They're not going to give it to people who matter. Well, the corporations are now not only raising the minimum wage. By the way, is it not hilarious? Donald Trump has done more to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour than Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders combined have done by letting these private corporations do it themselves, by decreasing regulation and decreasing the corporate tax. And they're given $1,000 bonuses. And remember, that what the left said is that they would give the money to shareholders, not to the people who mattered. They're giving it to their employees, and the left is now saying, well, these people don't matter, and it's not a lot of money. They don't need it, and it's not going to help them anyway. They're trying to have it both ways, which is nonsense. So, big win for the president on tax reform, and in my mind, it is his biggest win to date, restructuring the tax code. Huge deal. It's not a fundamental reform and overhaul of the tax code, but it's still pretty significant. It does simplify it. Big win. That's my win for him this year, that and Neil Gorsuch. The phone number, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. Robert in Atlanta. Robert, welcome. What's your big Trump win this year?
I'm super happy, Eric, and I really appreciate you taking my call. I love your show. But if anybody doesn't like Trump, and, some of the things I don't like is his tweeting, but you got to look at the market. The market has gone off the charts. That's a Ronald Reagan thing. It never happens with anybody that's not spectacular. I mean, this man is not my favorite president, but he has done it.
Hang on a second. The market actually went up higher in Barack Obama's first year than Trump's first year. So let's not say it only happens to spectacular people, because it happened to Barack Obama.
Well, I didn't calculate for that, to be honest.
Well,
I did not know that.
But no, here's the thing. So it went up higher under Barack Obama, but if we're honest about it, the main reason it did is because we were coming out of the massive market downturn under Bush. Here's the thing that Trump was able to do that Barack Obama couldn't. He got economic growth above 3%. Barack Obama kept it around 1 to 2%. It never got higher than that. Donald Trump was able to get it over 3%, and the left wants to say this is Barack Obama who did it, when it's not true. It only started going up to 3% after the regulatory gutting that Donald Trump has engaged in. And that, I think, let's give him that instead of the stock market increase, because, in fact, I saw a graphic earlier today about that, and basically the big stock market shoot-ups tended to happen with Democratic presidents. Now, don't say that that's because of Democratic presidents, because in many times Republicans were hired to fix the messes of Democrats, and when they left office, by the time they left, you had the economic upswing that Democrats then benefited from. There isn't a causation there. It's more of a correlation and has to do with other matters. But we do have to admit that if we're going to use that metric, Barack Obama went up higher in his first year than Donald Trump. So let's not use that metric. Y'all, will you agree with me, please, that collectively people are stupid? I have the prosecution's evidence exhibit 11 billion. AMC theaters, in some of their theaters, they have posted the following sign. Please note, The Last Jedi contains a sequence at approximately 1 hour and 52 minutes into the movie in which all sound stops for about 10 full seconds. While the images continue to play on the screen, you will hear nothing. This is intentionally done by the director for a creative effect. I'm not going to tell you what the scene is, but if you see the movie, it will be obvious to you as to why there is no sound. Let me just, this isn't a spoiler. Let me just say that in space, there really aren't any sounds. But people are complaining. They're going to the management during the scene, and it's causing them to miss the movie, and then they're wanting refunds back because they had to get up to go tell the management that there was no sound for 10 seconds. I mean, by the time they get out of their seat, cross the aisle, go down and exit, the sound should be back, and yet they're demanding their money back. They're complaining. People are stupid, y'all. People are stupid. Collectively, individually, wonderful people. Collectively, people are stupid. The herd is insane. Now, when we come back, I'll take your phone calls. What did Donald Trump do this year that you think is the best thing he's done? Neil Gorsuch, tax reform, increase in deportations, the circuit court packing, you name it. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. I'll also get into some of the Christmas stuff this year, preview the Christmas show for you when we come back. Talk a little bit about the holidays, and we'll get you all of the latest traffic. Keep in mind, we got that tractor-trailer fire right there at 75-285 on the north side by the Braves Stadium. It is Erick Erickson here. It is 39 after the hour. Question! So, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, but I like the Substandard podcast. It is a good podcast, and Victor Mattis, he asks questions by saying, question, which is basically what's his name from the PBS show. In any event, question! What's your favorite Trump accomplishment this year? Let's go first. Jesse in Snellville. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Eric?
Good. What's your favorite accomplishment?
My favorite thing he did was to take advice, in particular to take advice from Mike Pence when he did take advice.
He did take advice, yes. I think that's a good one.
I'm sorry? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I was going to say the reason I say that is because I don't think America was really ready to elect someone like Mike Pence. I did vote for Trump, but I'm kind of a kindred spirit with you in a lot of your comments. And I appreciate the guy, appreciate what he's done, but I really do appreciate how he does have some good people in his corner, and like Mike Pence. So I don't think he takes all of his advice, or maybe Mike Pence doesn't always speak his mind, but when he does, that's awesome. And there are many things that I like that Trump did this year, but I say they would have to be traced back to, like you said earlier, him taking advice and surrounding himself with good people. Like you said, he talks with other people before he makes these decisions.
Yeah,
and in
I
particular,
think that...
one of my favorite ones. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. You finish.
I was going to say one that just stuck out recently is I do like what they're doing in Jerusalem. Not crazy about how Nikki Haley's phraseology, like you, I think you would agree. You know, a little, maybe a little much, but at the same time, just in how it went across. But at the same time, I don't blame her. But I like the fact that we are, kind of taking a stand for Israel in that regard.
Jesse, listen, thanks very much for your phone call. I was okay with what Nikki said, totally. Didn't have a problem with it. I will tell you, speaking of Pence, I just got a text message from one of his top advisors. They were taken off from Afghanistan. I'd sent him a note the other day. Didn't realize they were in Afghanistan, saying they just had a good visit, wishing me Merry Christmas, but they've had a very productive time there, and that is good to hear. Key in Brazelton, you're next. Welcome. What's Trump's big accomplishment?
Hey, Eric. I see Trump's greatest accomplishment is his leadership. Initially I voted for Ted Cruz, and I thank God that Ted Cruz didn't win and Trump did, because I don't think Ted Cruz would have made that big of a difference.
Wow.
Trump is laser focused on his agenda. He's courageous. He has tons of opposition, and he's just really defining leadership to me. He's unrelenting. He's bringing people on side. I mean, he's just making a difference. He's getting results. I know it's unorthodox, a lot of his methods, but it's getting results, positive results that are going to change America for the good.
All righty. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas. All right, folks, y'all got to do me a favor here, because we don't have a ton of time until the end of the show. We got a lot of people who want to call in, so please make it quick on what your point is for the president's great accomplishment. Let's go back. Teresa in Kingswell. Let's see. Can I get you? It looks like the whole call system computer screening thing has frozen here for a second. Andrew, can you fire up Teresa on line 6 for me? Because there we go. Teresa, how are you?
Hello.
Hi there. So what's Trump's accomplishment?
I think he found a way to get the Republicans united, and that's how we got this tax bill passed. He kind of did this thing like, hey, I'll get hold of Chuck and Nancy if you guys won't deal with me. And that was a smart move.
Well, the Republicans united around tax reform. That is for sure. This one may actually be one of my favorites of the year that got little notice. Tim in Bethlehem, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for taking my call.
Sure.
Very well spoken, the nice lady that was just on. That was part of my comment. But the fact that he opened up Anwar, that was something that people have been trying to get open for 30 years, 40 years, just like with the tax reform. So how much of an impact do you think that's going to have, not only for Alaska, but for energy independence in this country?
Listen, we have already begun exporting more than importing. I think Alaska just solidifies that. It's going to take about 10 years to get it out of there, but the way they've structured it, the next president's not going to be able to shut it down. So, listen, I think this is a huge deal. I've been a huge proponent of this forever. To give you an idea, if Anwar were a football field, the area that will be explored is no bigger than a postage stamp on that football field. This isn't a huge environmental crisis. And it's worth it. Rich in Marietta, you're next. Welcome.
Hey, Eric, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
3 words. You're fake news. He stood up to the left-wing media, and that is my favorite thing he's done all year.
Well, that is something that we're already seeing these fights being picked out there with people, and I definitely think this president, more than any other Republican president, including George Bush, who had real legitimate grievances against the media, this president has just been willing to throw punches at the media, and their meltdown has, if we are all honest, it has been kind of funny to watch. Matthew, Atlanta, you're next.
Yes. Hey, Eric. Merry Christmas to you. The gentleman that just spoke, unfortunately, took one of my points. But yeah, my other favorite thing is the absolute panic he's created in the Democratic Party. That, in addition to the insanity he's ensued in the liberal media, has been just fantastic.
Yeah, the meltdown on the left right now, hilarious. Thanks very much for the phone call. David and Marietta, you're next.
Hey, Eric, I would have to say that it's been his circuit court appointments because I'm sure, as you well know, half of these social issues that have been shoved down our throat have been done through circuit courts, and we're feeling the ramifications of that now.
Yes, we are, and he's got some more on tap. Alan in Auburn, Georgia, not Alabama, thank goodness. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. For me, it's the repeal of the individual mandate. It restores a lot of freedom of choice to everyone out there, to where the government's not telling us what we must buy and will be penalized for not buying it. It's not fair. It wasn't fair from day one. So it's got to be the individual mandate.
And the fact that the left is having a huge meltdown over the individual mandate today, all good answers. All good answers. I think, well, there are a number that didn't come up, and I will review them real quick. Neil Gorsuch, beating ISIS around the world, I think, is a huge deal. And tax reform. Tax reform, tax reform, tax reform. Gotta get tax reform, and we did. Happening now, the United States Senate is voting on whether or not to keep the government open. It typically only needs 51 votes, but they have decided to vote along with the House and need 60 votes the way they've structured it. This will be the last votes in the Senate careers of Al Franken and Luther Strange. Al Franken gave his final speech to the United States Senate, and Luther Strange is on his way out the door as well, serving 9 months in his replacement of Jeff Sessions. We will see how this vote goes. It's expected to pass. What is not going to pass is the House's $81 billion disaster aid package to help California, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands from hurricanes and fires. Now, I would like to just give you a few parting words here on tomorrow. I am going to be live tomorrow from 5 to 6, and from 6 to 8, I will transition from news to Christmas. And throughout the weekend here on WSB, you will hear the Christmas special. And I want you to note it is a rare day, particularly in this day and age, that you listen to a broadcast radio station. Not only that, one of the top radio stations in the entire country, and I don't mean that just touting our horn. It actually is one of the top stations in the country, allowing a host to talk about Christmas from the actual meaning of Christmas from a gospel perspective. And I'm very blessed to be able to do that, and I hope you will tune in throughout the weekend. You can also get it on podcast by texting the word SHOW to 444-999, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.